The bill inserts a new section 93Z into the Crimes Act 1900, which creates an offence of inciting violence against a person or group of people on the grounds of race, religious affiliation, sexual orientation, gender identity, intersex status, or HIV or AIDS status. It is not a defence to propose it is not a defence to the proposed offence if the person's assumptions or beliefs about the group of people was correct or incorrect when they committed the offence. The offence applies to public acts which include all forms of communication to the public, any conduct observable by the public, or public distribution of material. The act can be public even if it occurs on private land. The offences of serious vilification on the grounds of race, transgender status, sexuality and HIV/AIDS status are proposed to be removed from the Anti-Discrimination Act 1977. The Greens support this bill because we support the strengthening of laws against vilification and violence, particularly against vulnerable people and minority groups. It is clear that threatening and inciting violence can have a genuine and real impact on people in our community and their ability to participate freely as citizens and as community members in our society. The reality is that this bill removes the current requirement that the Attorney-General grants consent for prosecutions and the necessarily political decision making that this would entail. Instead, the decision to prosecute will be made by the Director of Public Prosecutions, who is far better placed to assess such matters. The increased penalties also reflect the understanding of the seriousness of the offending, with a maximum penalty of 100 penalty units and or 3 years imprisonment for an individual, or 500 penalty units in the case of a corporation. The offence is to be dealt with summarily unless the prosecutor or persons charged elects otherwise. Stakeholders, including the New South Wales Bar Association and the Law Society, have indicated their support for the proposal, and in the second reading speech the Attorney-General identified that to date there have been no prosecutions brought under the offence provisions in the Anti-Discrimination Act. And while this is accurate, it does not therefore necessarily hold that the existing laws haven't served an important role. They set a bar for public activity and guide both those who may seek to target others and those seeking their own protections. I think it is particularly important to note the impact that these kinds of publicly threatening and inciting violent behaviours can have on people's ability to be able to act freely and to participate freely in society. As a Member of Parliament in this place, I have at times felt myself in situations whereby, as a result of my race, as a result of people's comments and threats to me, that I have felt that it has challenged the ability to me to act freely in the role that I play in this place and as a role as a member of the community. I can say from a very personal level, the reality is that the sense of living with the threat of racism, the threat of violence, the threat of intimidation against your behaviour is a real and genuine thing that occurs. It means that as a result of saying these things, you cannot act and participate as freely as you would like to in society, and while that is the case, we cannot achieve equality and allow people to live free from discrimination and free from those kinds of violent or threats of violent acts. It is an important part of a diverse community to celebrate the differences that are in our community, but also to recognise that actually it is up to allies, it is up to others to actually step up and provide protection to those people that need it. It should not be just incumbent on the individual that is feeling threatened as a result of that, or is having violence, is being faced with the people inciting violence, to stand up on their own behalf. And it is crucial when we see acts like this coming through this place that it sends a very clear message that we as a Parliament do not support, we do not in any way condone publicly threatening behaviour or people inciting violence when it comes to the issues of race or religious affiliation or sexual orientation or gender identity or people of intersex status. It is particularly important to note the addition of the inclusion of, I should say, people and persons that are part of groups that may face the publicly threatening or inciting behaviour as a result of their sexual orientation, gender identity, intersex status, or because they have HIV or AIDS. I would note that on a recent inquiry that I sat on in relation to violence against frontline emergency service personnel, one of the things that really disturbed me was the lack of awareness about the realities around HIV and AIDS and the realities around what those conditions are and how they can be treated and how they can be transmitted. And it was clear from that we have a long way to go when it comes to a community understanding, and everything that we can do to identify and recognise the need to provide protections to these people is really, really important. I think that it is also really important that we recognise in making this commitment that just making amendments to the crimes, just making amendments and treating these things as crimes is not enough. There needs to be a genuine commitment to the idea that we don't in any way support or condone forms of discrimination and crimes against people that are actually identifying as these vulnerable communities. But I think we also need to go further. The reality is that in this bill we provide protections to people for some specific acts. But what we would want to see, and what the Greens are committed to, is seeing the protection of human rights more broadly and the freedoms of people being able to protect and live free from discrimination. And I very much look forward to the day that we're standing in this chamber, not just talking about the protections of people in relation to publicly threatening and inciting violence, but also looking at the idea of celebrating and respecting people's human rights and ability to live free from discrimination across the board by introducing a Human Rights Act for New South Wales.
Right, again, the move for Newtown.